So when I came up with Whiskey Marketing School, I thought it was a good idea, but I wasn't really sure. But I'll tell you about the whole story. I'm Daniel Whittington. I'm a chancellor at Wizard Academy and Whiskey Marketing School. And what I wanted to talk about is I've realized in the last couple of months, as we've made this transition into new videos and things like that, that there's a lot of questions about what is Wizard Academy, what's Whiskey Marketing School. And so one of the things I'm going to do with these videos and continue to do is tell the whole story from only my perspective of how I got to Wizard Academy, which you've heard some of those things, how I developed things, how we started the school, maybe stories about Crowded Barrel, and you'll just get a little bit of insight into how we ended up where we ended up. And then I'll mix those also with continuing other stories. But in, let's say, early 2000s, I was living in California, and I got interested in wine because I lived in the Central Coast in San Luis Obispo, and I was within, 50 miles in any direction of astounding vineyards. And I started studying wine because I'm a nerd, and anytime I like something, I study it, and that's how that works. And I got introduced to the whole wine somm world and sort of tiptoed into the origins of the Court of Master Sommeliers and started to sort of explore all of that territory. And pretty quickly figured out I don't like wine as much as those guys like wine. And I didn't have a problem with that. Ooh, that smells good. I didn't have a problem with that. I just realized, hey, I like drinking wine, but the guys at this table studying for the Master Somm course, Intro to Master Sommelier course with me, they really like wine. and I maybe don't like it enough to be as into all of this as they are. And I have a personal opinion that you should really sort of simplify the things you focus on so that you can dig one big deep hole instead of a bunch of shallow ditches. And so I went, I'm gonna just stay focused on music. But I took with me a love for deductive tasting that I learned from the Master Sommelier program and from the people studying to be Master Sommeliers. And the knowledge that like you weren't just picking things out of thin air, you were leaning on process and knowledge and history and context to understand what was happening in a glass and then coming to conclusions. And I also started to understand the difference between what I felt was a good wine sommelier and what was a shitty wine sommelier. And it goes back to what I taught or talked about a few weeks ago, which was I think all the great wine sommeliers are shepherds and guides, and they're not assholes, and they're here to share and take you one step further in your knowledge. And the jerks who exist in any category were just there to make sure you knew how smart they were. And fast forward a decade, I'm at Wizard Academy. I'm doing whiskey tastings for students at the end of the night because I'm a nerd and that's what I do, and I have whiskey in my office. And I used to sit in my office, and at the end of any class, I would give what's called a tour of Scotland, which is where I would just introduce people to the 5 regions of single malt Scotch, because I love Scotch. And it was just something to do at the end of day one, and it became a tradition that students looked forward to. And then I started applying things I was learning at Wizard Academy with communications and storytelling and how the brain works, and that tasting got more and more interesting and elaborate. And at the same time, I started studying whiskey a lot, like really studying whiskey, not just drinking and, Googling things. And I realized that whiskey was at this crossroads where it was starting to get really popular compared to what it had been. And the world of whiskey was filling with the same kind of people you see filling the wine somm world, which is some people who are out there to share knowledge and information and teach and guide, and some people who just want to be top dogs on the guru pile. And I looked around at the whiskey education programs because I was considering going through some of them on the side, and I found that none of them were teaching that one X factor thing that I thought really made the difference between a knowledgeable person and a knowledgeable person who has a positive impact on their environment. And I started talking that over with Roy Williams, the founder of the school, who was chancellor at the time, and I was vice chancellor, and he said, you should do that, start a school and teach that. And I went, holy shit, I can. We are a 501c3 educational nonprofit. We are legally certified by the U.S. government to develop education programs. That's what we are. Screw it, I'm going to do it. And so I started designing the Whiskey Marketing School, and then we worked with Kate Van Name, who and several other people at Steve Ray was one of the early founders, and they develop Kate's program or company at the time was a company that developed certifications for nurses and engineers and all of these kinds of things, and we sort of worked together to build an education methodology that captured all the things we thought mattered, but ditched all the things that we thought were just like, book pencil pushers wanting boxes checked, because we could. And we started it, and our first class was in 2015, September of 2015. We had 12 people, because that's where we sold out, because we weren't sure how much we needed and how much space. And we've been filling those classes 3 or 4 times a year ever since. We crossed 200 sommeliers, whiskey sommeliers. And with the primary focus on, yes, you have to know education. Yes, you have to know what you're talking about. But you also have to communicate and care about people. And this is an act of service, not an act of guru. And I'll tell you the rest of it in a second. But first I want to talk about Method and Madness. Now, Rex and I visited Method and Madness Distillery, which is the little baby micro experimental distillery inside of Middleton when we were in Ireland. And it's funny because their little baby micro distillery is like 7 times the size of Crowded Barrel's stills, but still it's small compared to Middleton, And what's so cool about it was that this huge Irish distillery, that at one point was the only Irish distillery in Ireland, has still taken so much care to protect being on the front edge of innovation and creativity. And I'm in love with that so much that they would specifically carve out property and space and equipment and money and barrels and staffing just to play around with things and see what happens. And that line is called Method and Madness. And there's a quote from their website that I love. It's Karen Cotter, who was an apprentice distiller at the Method and Madness. And she said, you have to be methodical, which means, yes, you have to have your shit together. You have to be intentional about what you're doing. You have to track things, but you're not going to create anything interesting or new without risking things. And yes, that perfect balance of, that Niels Bohr, opposite of a profound truth is another profound truth. And so this one specifically, and you can find these on the shelves. You may not find this one. You'll find a bunch of variations. I've found all of them interesting. But this one specifically is bourbon aged, single malt, pot still, not single malt. Pot still, which in Ireland that means it has a percentage of unmalted barley, and there's a minimum percentage of unmalted barley that has to be in the mash bill. Aged in used bourbon barrels, and then moved into virgin Hungarian oak. So one, that's, new oak barrels, which is really cool, but also Hungarian oak. And the thing that makes Hungarian oak unique, or, Hungarian oak, is that it's, Hungarian. It's actually a different oak strain. So there's like Quercus alba, Quercus, and this is Quercus petrea, which is virgin Hungarian oak. And it's in the nose, you immediately get that dense buttered pastry shortbread cookie that you get from pot still Irish, or that I get from pot still Irish. But there's also sort of a dry tannin floating through there. And so it makes that buttercream seem, instead of liquidy and rich and decadent, it makes that shortbread seem sort of like dry, like a Chardonnay instead of a Sauvignon Blanc. There's a lot of pear and maybe honeyed apple, but still behind all of it, there's this sort of bedrock of dryness that I think is probably coming from that new Hungarian oak tannin. Oh, man. Okay, so this has sort of a split approach to me when I sip it, which is it starts as classic pot still and then transitions into something totally different, and you get all these little micro explosions of black pepper zest and tannin sort of popping around. But, wow, this might be my favorite Method and Madness that I've tried, because it adds that sort of X factor, unexpected turn that somehow makes the whole thing seem more interesting instead of a left turn that takes you away from what you loved. That's really good. The finish is soft oil and buttercream, still has a lingering dryness in the palate, Again, probably those tannins. Yeah, I'm a huge fan of what they're doing. I'm a huge fan that a brand that big takes time to innovate. And I think that should be encouraged and protected. And this bottle, by the way, is a generous gift from Shannon Hood, a whiskey sommelier, level 4 whiskey sommelier, and who's going to be here next week, not by the time you see this, but who's going to be teaching whiskey level 2 shortly. So, we built the whiskey program, and I'll tell you at length anything you want to know about the whiskey program, but and you can even go on right now, and the full syllabus for whiskey level 1 is in high detail laid out on the page, and you can see exactly what we do in each hours of the day in that class. But I think it's not really up to me whether the school is going to have a long-term impact. It's up to the students, and it's not going to be determined, its quality and its importance and its longevity isn't going to be determined by how good I teach or how I feel at the end of a class or how many accolades I get as teacher or the school gets. It's going to be determined by what the students go out into the world and do. I think that's how you judge a program. Any program is, what do the graduates go out and do? Any program that's worth anything should be judged only that way. And honestly, we're only 8 years old. So we're still learning, but right now I can tell you the graduates of this school are going out into the whiskey industry and doing incredible things. And I am honored to be a part of that. We often talk about, with consulting, how do you become a world-renowned consultant in business, is you pick businesses that were gonna succeed and then you get involved with them. And you just push them farther and faster. That's it. But a good consultant can't take a failing business and make a failing business a successful business. That's usually the business owner's killing that, or the systems are killing that, or the staffing or the industry is killing that. A good consultant can take a solid business and take them places they hadn't expected, right? Further and faster. And so I think what makes our school and what makes all the programs that we're involved in, from Stave and Thief to EWA, what makes us magical is that we've managed to find some really incredible human beings in the world, and we've had a small part in helping teach and train and develop and further what they were already doing and taking them farther. But really what they're doing is the magical part of this whole story. And I honestly, I think it's going to be decades before we know the long-term impact of what we've built and whether it's creating the kind of success or the impact in the industry that we want. But I'm grateful to be a part of it right now. And I can tell you, I've never been more grateful to be a part of a community. The sommelier graduates, they're amazing human beings, and they're doing amazing things. And I can't believe how lucky I am to be seen as even a peer in that group. And the community around this channel and the tribe and the vault, you are gracious and kind by a large portion, and are doing amazing things and are creating their own connections. And the fact that I had any small part in that is just something I will be forever grateful for. And so you're judged by your fruit, is what they say. It's a thing worth doing, I think, and it's a thing worth giving myself to, and that's why I'm still here, and that's why I'm glad that you're here with me. Cheers.